wait 1 minute for Harley. Computer or the phone? Good afternoon, everyone. It is time to begin our council meeting this afternoon, 3 o'clock. Welcome to all of council, except we have quorum. We will expect Councillor Greenfield when he does arrive. And to all of those who are listening in this afternoon, welcome again. This is a little unusual meeting for us in that it is scheduled as a planning meeting today, but we have some unfinished business to conduct from the council meeting of July the 13th. So we'll call this meeting to order and ask you all to join me in a moment of reflection. Thank you. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest around the table? And seeing none, we'll have a motion, please, to move into committee of the whole. Okay, thank you, Councillor Bell, Councillor Kentner, all in favor? All in favor? That is carried, thank you. Okay, and first off, we have a corporate services award of the provision of engineering services for structure 015 replacement. I have a mover and a seconder to put that on the table, please. Councillor Bartley, Deputy Mayor, thank you. Okay, and over to Darcy, I guess, or who's doing that?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is just a standard purchasing report. It's brought to you, for that reason. If you have any questions related to it, I'm actually going to defer to Tori, given that it is a bridge-related project. From my perspective, everything's been done based on the purchasing policy and we're within compliance. So you're probably going to have more questions relating specifically to the ins and outs of the bridge itself and what the process is. So if you have any questions purchasing, I can take them up. If it's infrastructure related, then I'll pass it over to Tori.
Bartley, Deputy Mayor, and Councillor Vickers in that order. Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Darcy, with this bridge, I see the tenders come in under budget, which is a good thing. Are we going to, or can we apply for government money on this bridge?
Through your worship, we have the infrastructure loan, then we would. It should be noted, of course, that if we award this tender today, any costs up to the point of would grant prior to starting construction, then at least the construction costs would be eligible for grant.
Sorry, Darcy, we haven't heard much of that. Are we trying to?
I apologize. Can you hear me now?
You are very crackly, Darcy. So I think what I'm going to do is try and answer the question for you based on what you said, which is that we haven't applied for grant money for this at the moment. But if grant money becomes available, it's certainly a project we consider because it is a large amount of money. But it really depends on what's available to us at the time of construction.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Deputy Mayor?
Your worship, thank you. I had a question for Tori, if I may. I'm just wondering throughout this process if alternate forms of bridge construction will be explored, and if she could share with us any potential timelines that are known at this point in time for construction.
Through your worship, yes, as part of the request for proposal, we did identify that the engineer needs to identify what a variety of bridge types that can be utilized and do an evaluation to then proceed with preliminary and detailed design. We have indicated that the engineering will take place this year with construction occurring in 2021. And if I can remember correctly, the end date for construction that is identified in the proposal is September 31st, 2021.
Thank you, Tori. And just a quick question, if I may. Sometimes I see Gilly spelled with an A and sometimes without. Do we know which it should be?
My understanding is what you see in this report, which is without the A is the correct spelling, but that might differ on different people's opinions.
Thank you. And Councillor Vickers?
Thank you, Your Worship. This question is for Tori also, and it really isn't a pertinent question, but I had a local resident ask me about where do the permits, because obviously we're building a bridge over a waterway, who deals with the permits from Gray Sauble, the DFO, and maybe some of the other agencies that we don't really know of. Is that done by the engineers or is that done by staff like yourself?
Through your worship. So it is part of the engineer's responsibilities to apply for those permits, but we definitely do assist when required or necessary. Staff will.
Yep, that's good. I just, we figured it would take quite a bit of work to actually, apply for all the permits and that sort of thing. So I assumed it would be under the general engineering costs. So thanks for your help, Tori.
Sorry, I'm okay now. Yeah. Are there any other further questions from council? Seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor of this report, this recommendation is presented, and that's carried. Thank you. Okay. The next one is the COR 2020-31 and award tender for the rehabilitation of Edwin Street. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Put that on the table. Councillor Kentner. And a seconder, please. Councillor Vickers, thank you. Okay.
Through your worship.
Thank you.
Yes, I hope that everybody can hear me, but please stop if my connection becomes worse. This is another purchasing report. There's a couple of moving parts in this report, given that it is over budget, yet still within budget. I say that the road work itself, the core works, is within budget. and actually under the $150,000. But the capital budget included two separate components of work. The first being the road-related works. The second is guide rail work. And we have combined that project, those two different parts, into one project. And the reason for doing that is to make sure that we didn't have a separate guide rail contractor come in, install the guide rails, and do damage to the new road surface. So this way it was tendered together. And ultimately, we have enough budget money overall to complete the work. It's just that it's coming from two separate capital budgets.
Sorry, Darcy.
Hello?
Yeah, we can't hear you.
Maybe I'll pass it to Tori again then to try and take this.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Your Worship. Barb,
Yeah.
I could hear it very clearly on my end. I don't know whether it's something
Oh,
that
really? So maybe it's us and we can't hear?
Could well be.
the time before I couldn't hear it either. So just to try and help you out a little bit there, Your Worship.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Okay, sorry, Darcy. Carry on, then everyone else can hear you.
He was in and out for me, Your Worship.
Okay. Yes, Councillor Bartley, could you hear?
I heard 90% of it. But anyways, Darcy, this seems like a fairly good price to get all of Edmund Street done for that amount of money, does it not?
It's a good price for a resurfacing project. I think ultimately the council needs to understand that although it's an asphalt resurfacing, there is no expectation from staff whatsoever that we will actually be able to get 20 to 25 years out of this road surface. There needs to be extensive roadbed work that needs to happen, but it's just not in the plan right now because the underground infrastructure is about 8 to 10 years away from needing to be redone. But the price on asphalt came back better than the Reclamite resurfacing, so that's why we're taking this approach. But we want to make it clear that there is no expectation that we're going to get 25 years out of this asphalt.
Thank you for that.
Yes, Councillor Kentner.
Through your worship, I just had a question for either Tori or Darcy, and that is, I see it's almost $60,000 worth of guide rail. I'm just wondering if that guide rail will extend more around the curvature of the road and protect people from going over a very steep embankment on the north side there.
I'll let Tori take this one as far as the extent of the guide rail.
Through your worship, so the intent of the guide rail on Edwin Street is to deal with the northeast side of the road as you bend there. If I recall, there's about 200 meters of area of concern where the road does drop off quite steeply, and so the intention is to install guide rail along that entire section.
Thank you, Tori. Okay, anything further from council? Seeing none, I will call a question. All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you. Okay, the next one is Development Services, DEV 2020-25, the Back 40 Glamping project. And I have a mover and a seconder, please, put that on the table. Councillor Kentner, Councillor Vickers. And Liz, are you with us? There you are. Welcome.
Thank you very much. What I will say, I know technology-wise, this is challenging. Front and center in my screen, I have the Deputy Mayor and Councillor Bartley. So I guess I would just wonder if there is a situation where we go more than a sentence or so, where I'm garbled or you can't hear me, if you could just give me one of these and I'll stop and we can go from there. I do have a number of comments to provide with respect to my report and the application and process in general. And then I intend to talk briefly through the various sections of my staff report directly. I have prepared some speaking notes to guide me, so you will perhaps see me reading. Those who've worked with me for some time know that I am susceptible to the occasional tangent on a good idea. So I'm trying to protect against that just a little bit. I do expect my comments will take approximately 10 minutes, 12 minutes, somewhere in around there. And at that point, then I'd be happy to address any questions that council may have for me. Firstly, I just wanted to clarify the process and next steps relating to this file, as there have been a few questions raised and some misinformation that's been circulating in the public. Today, council is receiving the recommendation relating to an amended request, which is for 8 geodesic domes on the property to be used as a tourist establishment. The draft bylaw would specifically prohibit ancillary tent or trailer camping alongside those units and sets out minimum yard setbacks for the placement of the units, as well as a maximum floor area for each of those domes. So the use, placement, and sizing is all strictly defined within the draft zoning. I note that this amended request reflects a reduction from the initial proposal for 12 units on site. And in discussions with the applicant and their planner last week, they have confirmed for me that the 8 proposed units reflect the scale at which they now believe the application or proposal is financially viable. And they do wish to proceed to a council decision on that basis. To comments offered last week regarding the notion of applications becoming too big to fail, I just want to highlight that this is actually one of the reasons why we rely on our official plan in pre-submission consultations with applicants. Not only are those policies intended to provide some degree of certainty to adjacent landowners about the types of uses that can be considered, but it also is intended to provide some guidance for those looking to invest and establish new uses. I personally carried out the pre-consultation with the Macintoshes, the applicants, prior to them closing on the property, and I'm of the opinion that their applications have been made in good faith on the belief that their small scale accommodation proposal is in alignment with specific permissions of the official plan. The plan allows for such uses subject to the applicant satisfying the development criteria within the plan, and based upon my technical review, I do believe they've done that. Public input is valuable, and constructive public input highlights issues of local importance for detailed and review and consideration by staff and council. But public opinion is not the only factor that is meant to influence council's decision on an application. And I do think that unfortunately, this is a common misconception, and I think is one that we should be looking to work to address over time. No bylaw will be considered today. That will return to a subsequent council meeting for a decision. As has been outlined within my report, site plan control is to be applied to the proposed use. This is a separate process from zoning and routinely is done after zoning is in place on lands. It's an internal technical exercise that's undertaken by staff and the applicant and is approved and secured by agreement upon review and approval by council. While there's not a mandatory public input mechanism to the site plan review process, it is ultimately council that decides on approval in the agreement itself, not staff. In this case, staff recommended that the site plan application be submitted together with the zoning, as we believe that having information about the proposed layout would be helpful to us in evaluation of potential impacts, particularly given the natural heritage features on site. We also wanted to give the public some insight into the level of detail that can be established within a site plan agreement. For example, the environmental impact study laid out specific mitigation activities to reduce or eliminate natural heritage impacts. And the draft site plan conditions include those measures. That agreement will establish financial securities to ensure that those activities are undertaken through the construction phase. And then over the longer term, the agreement can be enforced against future property owners, should that ever be necessary, the agreement running with the lands through registration on title. So staff have recommended that a decision on the related site plan application and agreement be held until following a decision on the zoning, as this does provide flexibility to include additional clauses should further matters be identified through our discussions today, or in the context of mediation should an appeal be lodged in the future with respect to a decision. So I recognize that not all members of the public who may be watching have had an opportunity to read the 15-page staff analysis and the many, many pages of supporting plans and documents. So I did want to just briefly speak to the content of each of the sections within the report. I hope to touch on some of the questions that may be sitting with council in terms of some of those items, but certainly we can leap back to deal with specific questions following the summary. So within the background section, I described the property and nearby uses, and I shared that the lands are designated as rural in both county and local official plans. I described the proposed amendment, which asks to establish new permissions on site for an 8-unit tourist establishment, allowing a maximum of 8 geodesic domes and ancillary uses such as trails and parking. Ancillary tent and trailer camping would be expressly prohibited. I also, within that section, identify the various studies that have been provided in support of the application and provide an outline of the process to date. Within the analysis section of the report, I identify that in order to support the requested amendment, council must be assured that the application demonstrates consistency with the provincial policy statement, conforms to the objectives and directions of the county and local official plans, and generally represents good planning. Within that section, I highlight the planning justification report, which has been submitted by registered professional planner Kristen Rennie. And I state that I'm satisfied with the evaluation and conclusions within her report, and then go on to address specific themed matters in relation to the application as have been raised through agency and public consultation and review. First, I assess the natural heritage and hazard considerations relating to a watercourse, small wetland, and pond on site. With respect to grading and drainage, I identify that runoff is expected to be maintained at pre-development levels and that the intentional placement of vegetative filter strips will ensure enhanced removal of suspended solids from surface water before it enters Oxmead Creek. With respect to the woodland and habitat on site, I identify that the environmental impact study and the addendum work that was completed this spring conclude that there is a very low likelihood that on-site activities would result in consequential impacts to the natural environment. Further, I share that a number of precautionary recommendations were included within the EIS and that subject to inclusion of such activities within the site plan agreement, Grace Level Conservation Authority is also satisfied that the proposal will not result in negative impacts upon the woodland or its features and functions. Secondly, within the analysis section, I speak to the road access and traffic generation, noting that the submitted traffic brief identifies that the existing road network can accommodate the traffic generated by the proposed development. I share the recommendation of the Municipal Transportation Services staff that the existing residential driveway be upgraded to a wider commercial entrance to service both the dwelling and the tourist establishment. And their comments note that they believe this will provide better sightlines for those exiting the site, while the widened driveway and the low level of opposing traffic will allow for ingress or entry to the site with very low probability of queuing in proximity to the crest of the hill. Next, I discuss water supply and servicing, identifying that while the initial hydrogeological report indicated theoretical suitability of the water taking necessary to support this use, the municipal peer reviewer recommended additional on-site investigations be carried out. The site investigation and reconnaissance work recommended by the peer reviewer was undertaken this spring, and the related report concludes that the risk of an adverse impact on neighboring water supplies is low and unlikely to occur. I note that I have had some follow-up inquiry from the public with respect to one of the recommendations within that peer review. Some individuals wondered why the holding symbol recommended within the peer reviewer's comments is not reflected in this current draft bylaw. The answer that I've provided is that the site investigation and the recon work undertaken this spring is in fact the work the peer reviewer had recommended be done in support of lifting a holding symbol. At the time of those comments, she had suggested we could consider approving the zoning amendment subject to a condition and holding that would require the applicant carry out additional study of the groundwater. This had been suggested by her as a way to expedite the application by putting the additional study requirement at the back end of the process. And while this was a technically available approach, based on the degree of public concern raised regarding the groundwater for this use, staff did not believe it was appropriate to consider approval of the zoning without a better understanding of the groundwater circumstances. And so we had required the applicant to do those additional investigations this spring to confirm supply and to better quantify any potential offsite impacts. This additional work has been fully completed and supports the application, and as such, no holding symbol is recommended. Finally, within my report, within the analysis section, I speak to human behavior. This, I think, is the focus of many of the public comments and concerns that have been provided. I do explain within this section that I'm of the opinion that the small scale of the use, limited per unit occupancy, absence of communal or congregate amenities on site, as well as the presence of the on-site dwelling should offer some assurance in relation to the voiced concerns, as together these characteristics can be expected to discourage poor visitor behaviors. Further identify that we do have enforcement abilities in relation to noise or trespass concerns, should they ever arise in relation to the use. I speak to the rural context of the site, demonstrating that the presence of non-owner occupants and visitors to the rural area is well established within local land use permissions. These permissions do allow for other accommodation types, as well as rural business uses that are permitted on an as-right basis at a similar scale to the one that's proposed. I further speak to the partnership-focused business model of this glamping proposal, distinguishing it from traditional campground or trailer parks, where on-site recreational amenities or group camping facilities are provided. Within the conclusions section, I identify that staff are of the opinion that the application meets all technical and policy criteria applicable, and reiterate that the official plan envisions a vibrant and diverse rural economy and a thriving natural and social environment to the benefits of residents and visitors alike. The development of passive, low-intensity recreational and ecotourism uses in the rural areas are encouraged by the applicable policy. Within this section, staff also acknowledge that there are a number of local residents who remain strongly opposed to the proposal. And I share my observation that the comments received really demonstrate that those local residents value the beauty and tranquility of the natural and rural landscape. And I note that many of the comments provided speak to residents' fear and concern regarding the possible loss of those attributes. I also identify that many of the stated concerns can be directly addressed, secured, or mitigated through zoning and site plan control. And I encourage the public to trust in the professional advice provided and our capacity to act together to address issues as they may arise. I note that I'm not suggesting blind or naive trust in that regard, but rather would really encourage folks to set aside their most protective instincts for a moment, to consider what the professional ecologist, hydrogeologist, and engineer are telling us through their reports, and to take this together with the small scale of the use and the various tools that we have at our disposal to regulate its operation. These professionals dedicate their careers to developing their understanding and their professional intuition, and they are bound, as am I, by ethical obligations of their respective professional associations. So that concludes my summary of the staff report, and I'd like to offer one final thought for Council's consideration. This particular application and the neighborhood response has been interesting, it's been challenging, it's been emotionally charged, and after living and breathing this file for weeks, as I've reviewed technical reports, policy, public comments, and have synthesized my planning opinion, it's my honest and heartfelt opinion that while this has been discussed as a values conflict between the applicant and neighbors, I actually believe that both the neighbors and applicants are saying many of the same things. Each have expressed love and appreciation for the peaceful rural character of the area, and all involved strongly value and prioritize the natural environment. These same qualities that drew many of the neighbors to the area are also what attracted the applicants to these same lands, and these are the characteristics that they're hoping to share with those who visit them. I think that instead this is an interest conflict, in that there's a clear direct benefit to the applicants as they will become the business owners, but the broader economic and societal benefits of this type of application don't really seem to be resonating with those most local residents. And I'm seeing a fair amount of language in the comments to the effect of, why should we have to shoulder change or potential impact on our way of life where there's no direct benefit to us? And I mean, fair enough, I get that. But I suppose the goal of planning and that—
Got me in, Richard.
Oh, great. Hi, Harley, welcome. So I think the goal of planning and the use of policy to guide decision-making is really based on the understanding that those broader economic and societal benefits that we're targeting through our official plan policies can't be realized by any of us if we can't find a way to compromise and work together to bridge our differences at the most local neighborhood level. The policy is really meant to guide council in this type of interest conflict by setting out clear criteria for evaluation of applications, and to make sure that we've used all of our available municipal tools to try and balance those local and broader interests. I don't suppose there's ever a perfect balance, but I do think it's our duty to try towards that goal. And so I guess my advice to council is this: honor people, use policy. We need to listen to the concerns of the public. We need to listen for those underlying values that are being expressed. We honor people by taking their concerns seriously and investigating what is truth and what is speculation. And then we need to use the policy. It has been specifically developed by council to guide council as decision makers to look objectively at the types of uses that will support future health of our economy and community over the longer term. And with consideration to those stated directions, we also need to assess the public narrative around applications critically, with an understanding that change and uncertainty can breed some irrationality and hostility. And we need to really try and set that aside and focus on the merits of the application and the full use of the tools available to us to manage change to our collective benefit. So that's all I have to say. I will stop talking at this point. I'd be very happy to answer any questions that council may have.
Thank you very much, Liz. I just want to commend you on a superb report and all of the time and effort that you have spent on this file to reach compromise, to satisfy the concerns and the interests of all parties who have communicated with you. And I know that there have been many of them. Really, it shows in your work and the values that you hold and that you bring to our staff complement and to our municipality. I know that this has been a difficult one for you. It has been, as you've said, emotionally charged, but your advice to council, I think, is spot on, very solid, and in terms of trusting the processes that we have approved throughout the piece and the strategic priorities and strategies that we have going forward, like our economic development strategies and so on. So to you, I just wanted, before I open it up for questions from council, because I know there are some, well done. And thank you so much for all of your hard efforts on this file. I'm sure you will have answers and for us, and will be able to guide us through this decision going forward. So thank you again, and I'll open it up for questions from council. Deputy Mayor, and then Councillor Bartley.
Your Worship, thank you. And I'd just like to suggest that for me, this report brings another very important and very difficult decision before this council. On one hand, we have a proposed zoning bylaw amendment that we've just heard Liz speak to and recommend go forward, as the application we now know meets all of the required criteria through our official plan. And I do want to take this moment, Liz, to thank you, as the mayor has just done, for your incredible dedicated work on this report. I mean, you've gone above and beyond in working with both the proponent and members of the impacted neighborhood. So thank you for that. We know Scott McIntosh has made considerable investment in fees and studies to get this far with his dream for Back 40 glamping. On the other hand, as you've mentioned, we have a group of individuals mostly residing in the neighborhood and some who don't, who are strongly opposed to the Back 40 glamping proposal. So, and these residents have justifiable concerns, and you've addressed many of them, Liz: noise and dust and lights and water security and open fires and traffic and signage and trespassing, property entrance and so on. And these concerns are real, and certainly I share them. And they definitely pose challenges. But from my perspective, as the mayor has mentioned, this council needs to look to our strategic priorities for guidance in this decision. I mean, just last Monday, July the 13th, council approved the inclusion of our newly adopted economic development strategy into the growing economy pillar of our strategic priorities document. And council will recall during our strategic priorities sessions that we spoke to the importance of this pillar. Growing our economy sits right beside infrastructure. And we'll also recall the 4 main factors in our economic development strategy being business ready, being business friendly, being open for business, being ready for business retention and growth. And because I've been involved in chairing the task force that worked with McSweeney and Associates to undertake this strategy, I must in all good conscience support this project in principle. And I think one of the concerns that I do share, though, relates to the number of geodomes to be potentially approved. And I'm going to put forward a comment that came in communication to this council from a neighboring landowner who suggested an application for 4 geodesic domes would be very helpful in removing opposition to this application. So I'm just asking for conversation from council if they feel like I do that our strategic priorities and that our economic development strategy should be strongly considered in this decision. And if there's any discussion on the flexibility in terms of the number of domes, Liz. Thank you.
So I can speak to the domes, or if you did want to have some further discussion from council, that would be fine as well. Maybe I'm off mute. I may as well speak to that now. I did speak with the applicant last week. I had received some similar communications from the neighbors wondering about the potential to negotiate the number of units down. And I think in general, this is the stage of the application where there may be some potential for negotiation. But I think what I would highlight in this case is that the applicant has expressed that at this point in time, considering everything that they have put into this project, and like you've mentioned, the fees and reporting costs have been quite substantial for them. They have indicated that at this point, the 8 units does represent what they feel to be a financially viable proposal for their go forward. And it does reflect an amended request from their initial 12 units that they were looking for. My understanding is that those additional 4 units were kind of the wiggle room available to them, and really had been proposed in response to a thought exercise that we undertake with staff, with applicants at pre-consultation. Generally, we do try to walk people through that thought exercise about, what if your first phase is wildly successful? Where would you go from there? And we really want to minimize those situations where people have put in all the time and work to go for, say, 8 units, and then realize once everything's all said and done, they really could have or should have gone for more, while at the same time trying to kind of address the concerns with the neighbors about gradually increasing applications. And so I think the intention is really to bring that discussion to the very front of the application process and say, okay, what are your midterm plans for the property? If you're going through all of the costs associated with those studies, let's look at those potentials and work from there. So they've gone through that exercise and have since stepped that back. My understanding in discussion with the applicant is that they would like to move forward to a council decision based on the 8 units. And I think that they feel that that's appropriate. I feel as well that it's appropriate, but I think they would definitely appreciate any commentary that council wishes to provide to them on the basis of unit numbers. This one's tricky, right? The scale is relevant. So we can certainly take those comments away if that is the case.
Thank you for that, Liz. And Councillor Kentner, were you next? No, okay, Councillor Bartley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And actually, I wanted to echo what the mayor said to you, Liz. I know you've put your heart and soul into this. I know that you don't bend the rules, and the effort that you put into it, I want to thank you on behalf of all the people in the municipality. We know you're doing your job 100%. Thank you. Now, to Council, or to Deputy Mayor Keaveney's comment, I thought about that for a while. There's people that would accept 4, but there's a lot of people, if you accepted 1, you're still wrong. So I'm still going for the 8. I can support this, and here's why. I was against this originally. I've been up to visit the property. I don't believe for a minute that anybody's even going to see or hear anything on that property. I have my own farm. It's kind of like a wildlife sanctuary. I have every bird and animal that the neighbors have there. We have ATVs, family and people on our property daily. We don't chase them away. And I have every bird or animal that the neighbors have. So I don't believe that legally we can go against this. I know that he can go to LPAT after and win. So I'm going to have to support this at this moment. Thank you.
Please. And Councillor Bell and then Greenfield.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you to the folks who've been involved in this. I want to bring to the attention of Liz some comments that I believe are still very relevant. You said in one of your remarks, Liz, you wanted to make sure what is truth and what might be just speculative. From my aspect, way back in December, when council chambers had about 50 people come out, one of the aspects which I have not read in the report, to me is actually a very serious comment, and it is truth. And it has to do with farming neighbors who have cattle. Now, I have a tenant farmer and on the home farm, and I have to tell you that absolutely at this time of year, in July into August, if you are running cattle, and in most cases they're running some cows, they're introducing a bull into that group of cattle. And they're looking for those April and May calves. So what happens is it becomes very interesting just from the animal kingdom, but at the same time, a bull, and Councillor Vickers knows this well, a bull becomes very protective of his harem, if I can put it that way. It does make for a very dangerous time to people who have no understanding of cattle and how to handle them, how to behave around them. And for the most part, cattle leave a very quiet life. Don't jump up and down, don't wag your hands. And if we have visitors who are coming to this site, I did not see in the report provisions for absolute security of the neighbor who may be running cattle, and I'm anticipating some cows. So that to me is absolutely for safety of the animals and the people. I believe that is a big time comment. Also along the lines with the farming community, I also did not see that today's age of environmental concerns on the farm and farming activities, the environmental people absolutely insist that farmers contain their manure, either liquid or solid. But along with that, farmers must have an aggregate plan for where they can spread their manure. Now, I will not entertain for a second, should this be approved by the applicant, that they come before council in the future and say, it's July, it's August, it is the best time, but now I have to put up with the smell of spread manure and they are wrecking my business. The farming community is there first, and I did not read anything in the report that says they're going to be signing a document that says they are entering into a rural community where this kind of activity takes place, and it's a given. So if they're going to come up, I think Madam Mayor, you said this to me, if folks are going to come up from the urban center and they are going to enjoy life out here in the countryside, the atmosphere may definitely be changed upon nutrient spreading of manure. Now, I have a few other comments, but I'd like to hear from other councilors. And Liz, if you could talk to me about the safety of cattle and about the spreading of their nutrients on the adjacent properties, I would definitely appreciate your comment on that, Liz, through you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Tony.
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. So I can certainly, and maybe I'll start with respect to the question about manure and odor. So yes, agriculture is a predominant industry. It is an existing use in this area. It is a prioritized use in this area. And I think the province has stepped in to try and kind of address this conflict by odor type of situation through the introduction of minimum distance separation calculations. So what is required as part of the application is that the applicant demonstrate that they have met appropriate setbacks from all nearby livestock operations and manure storages. And so we have gone through that process. We did reach out to all of the abutting barn owners to obtain information about the type of livestock that they keep and where those livestock and the manure storages are located. And all of the geodesic domes on site have been located outside of that setback area. That said, thinking back to when I was in university and doing my field work, that was in rural Quebec and it was a pig farming community. And I will tell you that opening your windows during pig manure spreading, really the nose knows, that can be very strong. Interestingly, you do acclimatize to it after the first couple of days. I think maybe your nose stops working, but it is. I do take your comment. I would suggest to you that through OMAFRA, they do have a normal farm practices mediation board. So if there were ever a situation where there was an odor conflict that was raised, that is the mediation process that we would refer folks to. And what that is intended to do is part mediation, part education. And it really focuses in around what are normal farm practices. It protects those farm practices through mediation and seeks to educate non-farmer neighbors with respect to that. So I think from that odor perspective, I don't think the applicants have any notion that there won't be agricultural related smells, noise, dust, those types of things. It is an active agricultural area. I think that historically, St. Vincent Township did actually, whenever they created a lot, they registered what we've coined the common sense rural land user agreement. And that's registered on many of the properties across the township. And that agreement really just kind of highlighted that, hey, you're in an agricultural area, there may be smells and odors from time to time, that's to be expected. I think as a voluntary provision, that's certainly something that we could highlight within the site plan agreement, just to say that, you know, this is something to be expected and mediation will be referred through OMAFRA and their normal farm practices board. But I think that applies to all rural land uses. It's not exclusively a glamping related concern. It would apply to the various other commercial and business uses that are permitted. With respect to safety from a livestock perspective, I think farm owners are definitely diligent in this regard, making sure that things are properly fenced and signed. I would encourage them to do that. I know that safety concern comes up quite a bit when we're discussing trails through the rural area, and I don't think that we're unique in having or voicing some concern regarding conflict between individuals and livestock. My understanding in speaking with the applicants is they do intend to provide guidance materials to their visitors, which would include some education materials about that type of thing. With respect to this property in particular, I do understand that their south lot line abuts a cattle operation. And so I think certainly this is something I could take away if there are specific considerations relating to fencing or additional signage that we should be putting on this property. But I don't think in general where we allow for access to the rural area, there's a trail that runs right by. I don't think that is specifically limited to this particular application. I think it is a general consideration, and we can certainly put authorizations or notifications, I guess, in the agreement. But I don't think there's a specific way to address that head on directly, aside from really just that education piece.
Thank you, Liz. Councillor Vickers.
Thank you, Your Worship. And Liz, I'd like to, along with my other councillors, congratulate you on your hard work on this file. We had a little bit of a conversation there a week or so ago, and I guess where my questions kind of come from is, you know, can you help us understand where the rural and the environmental designation applies? Because let me kind of just say a few more comments. If it had been zoned agriculture, would this property be allowed to have the bylaws changed, that it could be could have basically these glamping sites on it. Sorry about that. It wasn't very clear, but hopefully you got what I was trying to put down.
I did, thank you. So I guess high level, if we look to the county official plan and even above that provincial policy statement, it has us look at our land area in a couple of different ways. Some areas are identified as rural designation and other areas as agricultural. And the distinction is made within the county official plan. It's within that plan that the county has set out what areas are considered as rural and what are prime agricultural. Prime agricultural lands are subject to greater restrictions in terms of the nature of uses that can occur there. On agricultural lands, it is limited specifically to agriculture, ag-related, and on-farm diversified uses, and those are all very scale limited around what can happen. On rural lands, it's a little more flexible. In terms of the permission, it's recognized that in a lot of the cases that are in the rural designation, there's more fragmentation of the lots in the area. Sometimes the operations are smaller, maybe the soil is rocky. In this case, for example, we're in a drumlin field, which can kind of make for unpredictable soil conditions and drainage. So I think it really, the policy, I guess, is very different in those agricultural and rural areas. The commonality being that agriculture is a priority, but the rural area being that flexible area to consider exactly this type of use.
So what my point is that we continue, and not just here in the municipality of Meaford, but all across Ontario, whether it's down in the below the Highway 7 area, below the 401 into the Niagara Peninsula, we continually reduce the amount of farmland that we allow people to farm. And I kind of thought we'd maybe start turning the corner a little bit on this after the spring when the supermarket shelves emptied out a little bit. But we really do owe our living or our lives to the top 6 inches of soil and 6 inches of rain in the growing season. And so it's my concern that we continuously erode the amount of agriculture land that we take away for whatever reasons. And this reason is to have like a business on it. And in my mind, I believe it is nothing more than an 8-room hotel, the way it is proposed. So, and it was a comment that actually John Bulsink made back in at the public meeting. And, he I guess he proposed to council, I don't know whether you remember that or who was on council at the time, and he wanted to build a shop at his farm. And council said, no, go to town. That's where business should be, and that's where you should go. But here we are now because this, the Macintoshes actually wanted, create a bit of more of an agriculture or farming or a kind of a forest, sort of a bush feel to it. They're seeing that this is the place to do it at. I know it's only a 25-acre lot property. 10 acres of it is a field right now. I do believe there's soybeans growing in it. So almost half of his land is devoted to agriculture. And now he's saying that if this is approved, that he wants to take that land out of agriculture production and make it into trees. He wants to plant trees in it. So here we are, we're allowing people to come out of the municipalities, out of the urban settings and into the agriculture settings where there can be problems. But you yourself, Liz, have told me and reminded me other days and today also that we need to work with each other. So that part can maybe be worked on, that we can kind of co-live. But now all of a sudden we're now taking the 10 acres of property out of production. And maybe that's not a big deal to a lot of people, but it happens over and over and over again in different, not just municipality of Meaford, but in all municipalities. And it's just an erosion of the agricultural land base. And it is a concern of mine. To say that it's less suitable to agriculture, that doesn't have as good of qualities, I think is what you're trying to refer to, Liz. I look at the Adams and there a few years ago, they had the first place corn at the local fall fair. I know it's only a small picture in time, but that year they had the best crop of corn as judged by the Meaford Fall Fair. If you go east of that, on that concession, you get into a very, very modern chicken farm that was not there a few years ago. So, where does agriculture really stop and start? If this proposal was in more of an area, and if I can try and paint you a picture, and to everybody, if you go out the dairy line and you go past the county line where the municipal shed is on, you keep going further west, and then you get into a lot of development there. Liz, can you picture it? You were looking up in the air. There's been a lot of lot creations, but very, very stony land. Really not land, it's just stones and trees. It wasn't in agriculture, so it couldn't have been taken out of agriculture. And this is my concern, is that we keep doing this again and again and again. That agriculture land is being sacrificed for somebody to have a business on it. And I don't really approve of it, but I understand that we are in a bit of a spot that we can't really say no, because it is designated rural hazard. So I don't want this to turn into another boutique hotel and them taking us to the LPAP. Is that what it's called? Steve, you said the LPAP board, and having us drag on any longer than it has to. I realize that, but I do think that maybe it would be a good compromise, a good consideration to respect the agriculture land and the agriculture people around them, that if maybe did take these 8 sites down to 4. So that is kind of where I'm coming at, and those are some of my comments.
Thank you, Councillor Vickers. And Liz, any rebut?
Sure. I understand what you're saying, I guess is what I would suggest to Councillor Vickers. And we did have, I think, a good conversation talking about that balancing of uses. And sometimes I find it helpful to kind of invert an application on its head, or invert a question on its head to try and answer it in a more fulsome way. And I think that that's what I'll suggest here. What I'm hearing you say is that there are perhaps areas that are less suited to agriculture, that are more suitable, I guess, for other uses in the rural area. And I think that certainly is the intention of the official plan, is to try and provide some level of hierarchy to the land use designations, so that we are protecting our most valuable agricultural land strictly for agriculture. That is a policy decision that's been made in this case at the county level, with input from OMAFRA in terms of where those rural and agricultural lands fall. And I think if there are, I guess, concerns in terms of the inclusion or exclusion of areas one way or the other, that's certainly something that we can talk about with County Council, and perhaps raising that through our official plan review process later this year. But I guess the question that I would pose back to Council, and I don't need a response, but just for your thought, is if not on rural lands, then where? And I guess the point being is that certain uses do not lend themselves well to the urban area. And certain uses by their nature are looking to actually do what the provincial policy statement has told us, and kind of leverage those rural and natural assets. And that can't be done in the urban area either. And so where we are actually looking to protect agricultural land, those are those prime ag class 1, 2, 3 soils. We've said, nope, those uses don't go there. The rural lands are the remainder. The rural lands are the option. And so I guess I'll just leave that with you for consideration. I don't want to, kick the can down the road in terms of the question. I do acknowledge that they're looking at taking lands on the property out of production. But I would just suggest to you that we do need to have some consideration in terms of kind of that big picture. If we are wanting to completely prioritize and exclude other uses other than agriculture on some lands, it does require us to look elsewhere for where those uses can be accommodated with the least impact. And I think that that's the approach that's been undertaken at the policy level.
And if I could, Your Worship, and I agree with exactly what you said, Liz, I think it would be an interesting conversation to have, and to make people realize that, you know, all that land down in the Niagara Peninsula and around Toronto is Class 1 land, and it is being taken out of production. And what are we replacing with? We don't have the ability to make any more Class 1 land. But if we keep allowing our rural land to be eroded, you know, you can make what do you want to call it, marginal land, rural land into better land. You can clear the trees, you can take the fence rows out, you can put tile drainage in, you can do a lot of different things to make it into very, very productive land. And I think, you know, sorry if I you know, offending your profession, Liz, but I think in past our planners haven't done a good job in realizing that that you know, just because it's in small parcels doesn't mean that it's not good agricultural land. Like, you don't have to go very far from that lot, from the McIntosh's lot, to realize there's some very good productive land around it. So that's my concern, that we're sacrificing more agriculture land at this time. And that's why I'd like to, you know, you say about turning it on, you know, turning the lens in a different direction. If I can, I won't be too much longer, Your Worship, is if I tried to take a farm into the municipality in the town of Meaford. So let's take, I went and bought the MCS land. There's 6.2 acres there, and I decided to set up my farm there. Would those neighbors be really that happy with me putting, you know, I could haul in the feed, I could haul out the manure, you know, but I could keep easily 10, 15 cows, some chickens, some pigs, bring all the feed in, and would the neighbors be really that happy? So this is what I sometimes find that our planners aren't really doing a very good job of planning, to realize that they do have to coexist with the people around them. I know it's all nice and easy to say that we'll all coexist, but there can be some very uncomfortable stares and passing by on the rural roads when neighbors don't like neighbors. So anyway, thank you for your time, and I appreciate your work.
Thank you, Councillor Vickers, and over to Councillor Greenfield.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Liz. First of all, I want to apologize for being so late getting to the meeting. I had to have Mr. Postings come and pay me a visit. It's pretty hard to believe in this weather, but my computer was frozen. Anyway, that has been alleviated for now, and hopefully it will stay that way. Liz, again, excellent work, a lot of work. I think maybe you had a little bit of at least indirect help from Rob A. and Kirsten, and I want to give them credit too for helping with this. But no, it's an issue that has developed into a major one. And as I think as certainly Councillor Bell and Councillor Vickers have indicated, it's not just necessarily this 25 acres up at the end of 1516 that's involved. It involves a bigger picture. I've had a number of concerns about the application. I have toured the property, met with Mr. McIntosh and his wife, and their little new arrival in their family, and it helped alleviate a few of my questions, but certainly not all of them. I looked up the meaning of back 40 in Merriam-Webster dictionary, and basically back 40 refers to an isolated, remote part of a property, and may be difficult to apply that interpretation to the 25 acres that the McIntoshes have. Certainly the 4 domes that Scott is calling for south of his house are in quite an isolated area. It's a nice little meadow surrounded by trees. The other 4 out in the soybean field don't have quite that will not have that same characteristics. So I'm not quite so worried as much about visibility. If you put them back far enough from 1516, they may not be visible, but noise travels a long ways. What my main concern, and I passed this on to Director Tory, and I don't know if Tory is with us right at the moment or not, but it's the entranceway, that is proposed. Now, it's the same entrance as the one that goes into the house now, with some enhancements that the driveway has to be widened. There has to be, I expect, another culvert put in. There has to be some brush cleared and so on and so forth. But I found it interesting when I talked to Mr. McIntosh, he actually said he thought the entrance should be at least a couple of 100 feet further to the west than what is being proposed. And I wholeheartedly agree with him on that one. I think where it is located, even with improvements, even with a big sign up, I can just see somebody coming up the hill regarding their GPS and getting just up over the brow of the hill and stopping and looking, and I guess this is the place. In the meanwhile, somebody's coming up behind them at 85 kilometers. I think there could be problems there. As far as cutting it down to 4, I think the McIntoshes, they've applied for 8. They want 8. They have a plan that calls for a water system, a sewage system, septic, that will accommodate 8 units. And I think that's what they eventually will want. We could start with 4. It's reasonable. But when they put in their systems, their underground systems, I think they're going to want to do it once and for all. I don't think they're going to want to come back in 2 or 3 years and add on to it. For one thing, that's going to cost a lot more money than if they do it all at once. To be quite honest, if this application was on a property 300 or 400 feet down the road from where I live, I would not want it. I would oppose it. However, and I won't get into, there are other reasons other than the interest rate. But our official plan covers it. It's flexible enough. There's enough leverage. Our official plan at the lower tier allows it. I'm surprised the county official plan even seems to be more receptive of ideas like this. Certainly the provincial policy statement says that. I wouldn't want to be one of the neighbors. I really wouldn't. But this is a situation where it can be done. It's, I think, frivolous for us to vote against it, regardless of our feelings. It could very easily go to LPAT, as Paul has mentioned, and they'd win. They would win at LPAT. So our planners say, hey, it's good to go. So I don't think we have much choice. Hopefully when we get to review our official plan, situations like this will come up again. I'm sure they will, and they need a lot of discussion at that time. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Greenfield, and over to Councillor Kentner.
Thank you, through Your Worship. I will be voting to support the motion. And I also want to thank Liz and the planning staff. I think this is some of the most outstanding work that I have seen since I've come on council. A lot of initiative to ensure that the project is safe and appropriate and is not going to damage the interests of the residents of the area. I think they've been very empathetic to and respectful of the ratepayers' concerns. But also as a council, we've made growing our economy the focus of our strategic priorities. And in supporting the staff recommendation, I'm supporting our official plan, which recognizes that the pillars of tourism and agriculture are intertwined in a rural economy. I just don't think that we can have it any other way. We have to grow this community, and I can tell you there's a whole generation of young people coming up in Meaford who will vote us off this council because we want to turn our backs on every, progressive thing. I believe the neighbors did a really good job, and I hope they appreciate that we really have listened to them. Also, the proponents, I think, have been very, very cooperative, and I certainly support the 8 units, which I think is a minimum for viability. And I think that staff has built in all the protections that are really needed here, so it's a win-win. And there's already a 38-point agreement, which I understand, which is a huge job for our planning department. And I think they're going to, expand on that and improve on it. So I think this is something that I definitely support. And I also believe it will generate more business for our restaurants and all of our retailers in Meaford. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Vickers.
Thank you, Your Worship. And
Rob, can I interrupt you just for half a second?
Yes, you can.
A round of everybody, and you've all had more than your 5 minutes, which is great. So I think if we can keep it, fairly close this time, we'll have another round. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so I agree with Councillor Kentner with everything he said, and these are my concerns that we are going to have, with COVID-19 and the way the whole society is going to change out of this. People are going to want to get out of the large urban centers and into the rural areas, and this is just helping it. Like, we need to start protecting our farmland. Like, just because people want to move up here and have a 10-acre piece of land because they don't want any neighbors anymore, doesn't mean we should do it and that we're being anti forward thinking that on this, Ross. So I really disagree with your comments. This is the tip of the iceberg, and there's going to be more and more pressure all the time on to change our rural lands into residential lands, and that's what it's going to come down to. And until we decide that this isn't the way we want to do that, we value our production of food, then we're going to be in trouble.
Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have one further question here for Liz, and it has to do with the water. Now, when I read the report, the report said that there had been studies done and that the neighbors who said their wells go dry is going to be mitigated. And the word that was put in our report was the word cistern. Now, the cistern, when I looked it up, it said it was a holding tank. Well, if it was a holding tank, I would go for that being stainless steel, water potable, service the area. But the word that was used was cistern. And that to me represents something different with rain runoff water for other purposes. So I would like you to tell me about the water. And also, Liz, on the business of signage for the road. My neighbors and friends at Coffin Ridge Winery have this very issue of folks traveling really fast down the road. They have no idea where the winery is located. They break over the hill and they can get into things with the local farmers and so on. And you have said that signage would be appropriate for that, telling them where the camping is. And yet I know that the folks at Coffin Ridge have applied for signs on the second concession and they've been denied. I know that. So stating today that the glamping folks will get a sign, but the other ones have been denied, I don't understand that. And I do want to say this to the folks who have been speaking up. If I believe what I'm hearing with my fellow councillors, and I understand it all, I believe, Madam Mayor, when you call a vote, that this will likely go through. But just on the principle, Liz, when you said about the cattle and some of the other things not being addressed directly at this time, I think I was going to vote for this, but I think now that I am going to vote in favor of the voice of the neighbors. And I think that there are some issues which have not been directly addressed. And so with that, Madam Mayor, I am going to vote not to do the glamping. And you and I, Madam Mayor, have had conversations about the LPAT process and in specifically about Boucher Street. So you know that I know, but I think listening to some of the answers, I have changed my mind literally at this meeting. So the one about the signage, Liz, is one that I'm interested in having further comment. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, if through you, I may proceed. So I guess first I'll just speak to the water. So the intention is not to capture surface water for that cistern, but rather to allow for essentially, I guess it would be kind of like trickle feeding through off hours to ensure that they have a stockpile of water available should they be ever at full capacity and have kind of a peak demand. My understanding is that through the small water systems regulation, they will be working with the health unit in terms of, I guess, maintenance and care of their internal system for that. And so it is my understanding that agricultural surface water would not generally meet the requirements for filling of the cistern, but rather it's intended for groundwater supply to fill that cistern, just to address that peak demand. So, you know, as it is within the urban area on municipal water, demand certainly does kind of ebb and flow throughout the day. And so within that groundwater report, and the functional servicing report rather, they have kind of spoken to the idea of usual average daily demand versus instantaneous peak demand. And that's what the cistern is intended to do. In terms of kind of the broader groundwater picture, so this is a drumlin field. We've got some heavy clay and some pockets of gravel and other types of sediments, but it is variable. And I think as well, the depth to wells is variable. Those folks who are on a dug well or on a shallow well, or who are in areas of the heavy clay, certainly will see greater variability in terms of their groundwater supply. But what the recommendation through that hydrogeological study is that they actually extend the well into the deeper aquifer, which would be less susceptible to variations in supply seasonally, for example, as things are warm. And what they've identified by doing the physical pump testing of the well on site is they now have a better understanding of how transmissive that soil is for the groundwater and how far away from the well itself they might expect to see interference. And what they've determined based on that study is that they don't expect to see significant interference with adjacent wells. So I think I'll just leave the water supply issue there. With respect to signage, I was not aware that Coffin Ridge has a signage issue, and I can't speak to the reasons behind that. I do know that, for example, we have various signage for hidden driveways. There's different kinds of tourism signage that are available on some of the main thoroughfares. It sounds to me like this might be something I need to take away. Certainly we have the tools through the site plan agreement if there are specific signage recommendations that have been made for any kind of advanced warning signage or that kind of thing. And I guess what I would say also is with respect to that entrance itself is that the entrance location is not a function specifically of the zoning. The entrance location is something to be addressed and secured through the site plan application. So if I'm hearing from councillors that they would like us to loop back to our Transportation Services Department to discuss their recommendations further, we can do that. What I would suggest though is that in talking with Transportation Services, they've gone out, they've done their site work, they've done their measurements, they've reviewed the traffic brief. And what they've advised me is that it's really kind of the non-intuitive component of this entrance that lends their support. And it's through that upgrade or the widening of the driveway where they remove any impediment to the free flow of traffic from the road into the property. And if you go back to the traffic brief and look at kind of the overall peak hour traffic generation or existing levels of traffic on the road, what they've identified there is that there's very low levels of opposing traffic. And so what you end up is that someone comes up over the hill, they do not have any reason why they can't turn directly into the site. I think the other thing, and I've confessed this to a couple of the counselors in conversations, but I did sit for a while at the intersection of the 11th line and 1516 waiting for neighbors to drive by that I could then follow them up the street because I just wanted to see it for myself as well. And I imagine probably a number of other councils have done the same thing. And what I learned in doing that, it really does kind of support the recommendation we've received from Transportation Services, is that from that intersection, you really can see if there is a vehicle traveling in front of you. And based on kind of the characteristics of the road and the road surface, I know certainly my Kia didn't do 80 up that hill, but I think given the hilly nature of it, you're going to be seeing if someone's traveling in advance of you. You will also see the dust cloud associated with those people traveling in advance of you. And when it comes to actually turning into the site, there would be no opposition to that. And I think the suggestion I've made to folks is that possible does not equal probable. And so I think that we do need to take that into consideration when we're looking at this entrance. The entrance has been there for 46 years, servicing the dwelling on the lands. And so Transportation Services has indicated to us that they don't see a reason to further investigate, but certainly that is something that we can address further through the site plan review process if there is the feeling that that needs to be looked at again.
Thanks very much for that, Liz. Deputy Mayor, did you have your hand up?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I did. And Liz more or less answered my question there. I was going to ask her about process now going forward, and if because of conversation that you've heard council have this afternoon, if there would be any adjustments or amendments to this particular report. But I'm gathering you're saying that will happen now in the site plan application, that we will see the concerns brought forward today addressed at that time.
Certainly, thank you, Deputy Mayor. So yes, I think one of the reasons why we had wanted to not come forward with a completely detailed site plan agreement is for exactly this reason, is that we did anticipate that through the discussion with council, there may be issues that for additional conditions that you'd like to see included. And we do intend to loop back to the applicant to discuss the conversation that we've had with council with them, because what I've seen from them is that they have been willing and want to put any voluntary measures in, as well as any that we might mandate that are going to make the relationships with their neighbors better in the future. And so I think there's a willingness there to have those further discussions with them, and certainly from staff. We want it to be the best development that it can be as well.
Thanks, Liz. Councillor Bartley. Last.
I'll just be short and sweet. Liz, I agree with you. If you're traveling east, there'd be no issue turning in the laneway. But if you're traveling west and you go over that hill and want to turn in, and for some reason there's a car coming up the hill and you can't turn in, you're going to get hit from behind. There's only 100 feet there. Actually, when pulling out of Scott's laneway, I put my window down to see if there's traffic coming over that hill, because if you pull out on there and at 80 kilometers an hour coming over that hill, you would be hit. Traveling west, that laneway has to go down the hill 100 feet. I 100% agree with that. I'm not a transportation guy though, so thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bartley. I think we've about exhausted everyone's comments at this stage, and we are just looking at the zoning bylaw here, changed amendment to the zoning bylaw. But I just wanted to add quickly my own particular thoughts on this, was that with regard to on-farm diversity and the county's focus on agriculture, and certainly I understand and fully appreciate farmers, the industry, and who's going to feed us down the way. I certainly appreciate your comments, Councillor Vickers, and all of the arguments that have been put forward. But I'm also particularly interested in growing our economy, and by introducing young people into our community as well. And that is another opportunity here with this project. So with that, I think Councillor Vickers, one more comment.
Can you hear me? Yep.
Yes.
So I don't have any more comments. I just wondered about procedure here, Your Worship. I think I hear some people saying they're fine with 8. I'm fine with 4. Like, how do we go about, taking this further? Do you want somebody, if I don't agree with the 8, then do I need to bring a motion forward saying that?
You need to bring up an amendment, a friendly amendment, and then we would vote on that. Liz?
So I guess, and maybe I'll need to reach out to Matt to weigh in this on as well in terms of procedure. But I did raise that specific question with the applicant in terms of, if the recommendation was made to take it from 8 to 4, where are they in terms of process? And my understanding in speaking with them is that they do wish to see a decision or a vote take place in terms of 8. That would be the committee of the whole recommendation. If we did find that at 8 that motion failed, I do suppose that we would need to go back and have that discussion with the applicant to just see if they just still want to proceed on that basis, and bring that back to the council for a decision on the bylaw on that basis. But I have some reservations, I guess, about that process.
So Liz, thank you for that. And the process going forward was if this motion fails now, this recommendation fails, it dies here. If we approve this motion, it goes forward then to council for a final decision. And at that time, then friendly amendments could be made. But if we decline this motion as in the committee of the whole, that's the end of it here. It dies here at this point. Matt, do you have a question? Sorry, go ahead.
So through Your Worship, so then it's either 8 or nothing then? Is that what you're saying, Your Worship, that what we're voting on today?
At this stage, that is the recommendation that is coming forward to take it on to the council meeting where we'll make the final decision.
Again, I don't quite understand when you're saying that if we pass it, then I'll go on to the council meeting for the final motion. Like, I'm a little confused there, Matt, I guess.
So through you, Madam Mayor, this of course is committee of the whole, so this is council's first opportunity to see this report. If it passes today, it will move through to council and the actual bylaw itself will be presented. Right now, you don't have a bylaw in front of you to have anything that can be amended. You've got the report that talks about the application, and so really what you're saying today, if you pass this, is we approve this in principle, but we'd like to see the bylaw. That's why the recommendation says, recommend council and municipality of Meaford enact a bylaw to amend the zoning bylaw. You will have that bylaw at the next meeting. And then if you wish to amend the bylaw at that stage, you're able to do that.
Okay. So then, are we ready to call the question? I think we are. All in favor of this recommendation as presented? 1, 2, 3. Yes, 4. All right. That is carried. Thanks again, Liz, for all your efforts. It's been a very, very good, solid discussion, and I appreciate the comments from everyone. We'll move that on to the council meeting. All right, the next one we have to discuss is DEB 2020-30, the Grace Sauble Conservation Authority Memorandum of Agreement. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please, to put that on the table? Councillor Greenfield, of course, and Councillor Bartley. Okay. And Rob, there you are.
Thank you, Worship. So I'm in the same location as Darcy, so I hope I don't have the same audio problems that he did going through this. But very quickly, the municipality back in 2007 had an agreement with Grace Sauble Conservation Authority where their staff, who are environmental planners, would provide advice to the municipality on natural heritage matters, in addition to their normal requirement of providing advice on natural hazard matters. The Conservation Authority has been working through a number of municipalities and updating that agreement just from a clarification point of view. We have met with them. We had a few concerns. The original draft, which I guess were raised by some other municipalities, and those have been changed, updated with regard to how fees are transferred. We collect fees. We actually currently get a check from the applicant, which is then forwarded on to the Conservation Authority to review. Our desire is to continue on with that process, and the agreement reflects that. So just very simply, we're recommending that council proceed and agree to the updated agreement with the Conservation Authority to continue providing comments to us on planning applications.
Great. Thank you, Rob. Any questions for Rob? Okay. Seeing none, I will call a question. All in favor of this recommendation as presented? That is carried. Thank you. Now we need a motion to move out of the committee of the whole, and a seconder, please.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, we have committee reports and the memos before we move out of committee of the whole.
Oh, you've done that backwards. I've got a motion to move out of committee of the whole.
It looks like there's two recommendations.
It looks like there's two. There shouldn't be, I'm afraid. Sorry. On to the next page.
I don't have another.
Yep.
But that's out of committee of the whole.
Yes, but that's an error, Madam Mayor, that we shouldn't be doing that particular motion. It's on the agenda
Scratch
twice.
that. So now we're moving on to committees and local boards. County Council, Deputy Mayor, do you have anything to report from county?
I do, Your Worship, thank you. Grey County Council met at the call of Warden McQueen on July the 9th. Dr. Era from the Grey Bruce Health Unit was present at the meeting and spoke to his upcoming order for the mandatory wearing of masks indoors where social distancing is not possible. Dr. Era is working with county staff on consistent language to be recommended to lower tiers for usage in their separate bylaws. So we'll have a report from county this coming Thursday, and there'll be more to report on all that's happening with masks. The transfer of lands for the new Markdale Hospital is finally complete. The process for the new hospital build is moving forward. Grey Highlands is working on the site plan, and everyone is anxious to see the building permit drawn and construction begin. What I feel is an important motion was brought forward by Councillor Desai of Grey Highlands, and it's a short one, so I'm going to read it. Whereas Grey County acknowledges the importance of retaining and attracting youth and promoting the benefits of diversity in order to grow the economy, and whereas led by economic development, current initiatives are underway and new initiatives are forthcoming in the immediate future. Now therefore be it resolved that a staff report be brought back to Committee of the Whole outlining current and future projects and partnerships that demonstrate the coordination, connection, and collaboration that foster a welcoming and inclusive community and support youth engagement and retention. And I think this really pertains to our discussion on the Back 40 glamping, and also to the comment that Councillor Kentner brought forward in relation to what's being called urban flight post-COVID. And I think Grey County and the municipality of Meaford are going to be poised perfectly to attract these young families, in particular to our regions. There was also considerable debate related to the proposed update by staff for an updated growth management strategy, since the province has said through their PPS that we can move to a 25-year outlook rather than a 20-year outlook where we sit currently. The feeling of many county councillors was that the timing isn't right to take on this project mid-COVID. Staff were clear that the data gathered is necessary for moving forward with their DC study and to provide support for lower tiers as we update our official plans in our own DCs. However, recorded vote did in the end bring support for the recommendation from staff. And that was all I had, Your Worship, on County Council.
Anyone else? Councillor Vickers?
Through Your Worship. So to our county councillors, I think some of my concerns about, bringing all these people up and allowing them to reside here and there, and our rural areas need to be kept rural, and our towns need to be kept as towns. So, you know, for the county to think we should welcome these people with open arms into our countryside and have them, you know, take up rural agriculture land again. You know, I hate harping on the same thing, but I'm getting a little short on the whole thing of the county tells us what to do, and then we're the ones that have to, you know, take up their orders and do it. You know, we're the ones with the problems with the glamping. We're the ones with the signs for the bike trails that we have to bring out of our budgets. It's fine for the county to tell us what to do, but they should either start contributing funds to it so we can afford it, or they should make sure they have the right planning in place to make sure that agricultural land doesn't get built on and taken out of agriculture production. So it's just a bit of a carryover from the glamping thing, but I really hope that our two county councillors take some of those concerns back to county council and tell them to quit making the problems that then we have to deal with here at the lower tier level. Thank you.
And I appreciate your thoughts, Councillor Vickers. I apologize, Your Worship. No, I appreciate that. And please know that Mayor Klumpus and I will do that. And I know that Liz is really hearing your comments and will consider them as recommendations come forward for our official plan process. So no, what you're saying is important.
Just to add to that, county has formed or is in the process of forming a committee for agricultural advisory committee. And I'm sure that's one aspect that will be looked at through this committee of council too. So we'll certainly take your comments forward. Councillor Kentner. Can't hear you.
Well, I had to unmute myself. I thought that was being done for us. So through your worship, I'm just curious. Paul, you would be strictly against wineries, fruit stands, equestrian establishments on rural lands, I guess.
May I answer that question, Your Worship?
Please go ahead.
No, I'm not against those things, Ross. Those are agriculture issues. Those are agriculture uses. You can't tell me a fruit stand isn't just a piece off the front of the farm. What I'm saying is that I don't want 100-acre farms divided into small 10-acre parcels that then get built on and get taken out of agriculture production. So I don't know whether you're trying to, you know, to tell me that I'm trying to have my cake and eat it both, but you aren't talking about the same thing. We're talking about development, not an extension of the agriculture uses. So equestrian centers, fruit stands, and wineries, you know, as much as the Niagara Peninsula has had their issues with these wineries, dividing these 100-acre farms up into 25-acre parcels and slapping a winery on it that then has to be then bought and then put an APO on them so they can't be subdivided again. You need to look into your business of development and zoning, Ross, before you should ask me those questions. I think you need to do some more research on that.
Well, with a final shot, if I may, through your worship, I would just really encourage you to read the county plan and see the plans that Grey County has for marrying agriculture and tourism. And
if I can just say one more thing, and it'll be quick. That's the problem I have, is the county is forcing this onto us without really taking a good look and taking a longer term view. It's great to say people come up here, we'll build you, we'll zone you 10-acre lots and let you build. But the county needs to realize what our production is up here in Grey County, and that's agriculture.
Just the last word on this, please. The county also is very cognizant about the push to shorten and to reduce farmland and the number of acres in a farm. So that's a discussion that has happened at the county level time and again, and it has remained constant. So I think we're going to leave that discussion here. We'll take your comments, obviously, to the task force, that the committee that is going to come to council or county council. But please know, Paul, that there is half of us on county council or more that represent farming communities. I think there was one more one more question, Councillor Bell.
I don't have a question on that, Madam Mayor. I was going to give a little report
please
on the
do.
BIA.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so the BIA met on July the 8th. It had been some time because of COVID. I think they got along all right doing their webinar. Basically, they're very happy about the Apple being open. They are very happy to see the restaurants with the out front cafe styles happening. They believe that's a very strong, positive thing to do in the town. Also, there's talk through the economic recovery that there's going to be new banners. There's going to be a banner at each end of town. I saw some preliminary concepts. I have not seen what the BIA have chosen for the final, but they had to do something a little bit different financially because of COVID and not meeting in a normal fashion. They passed a bylaw where 2 members were given a certain dollar value that on behalf of the BIA, they could continue to do business and make something happen. And that can also be modified in the future should we get back to doing something more along the lines of previous normality. So they worked on it. They've been conscious of what's going on. And anyway, the meeting went along all right, all things considered.
Thank you for that. And Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Your Worship. I thought I would just give a brief report on the Recovery Task Force. We've met twice since I've last reported on them. So our new manager of strategic initiatives, Janet Sperling, has delivered close to 50 toolkits to businesses, and they've been very well received. CIP applications are underway from restaurants who have opened their patios. A letter is going out to the businesses entitled Looking Business Best, and it will be delivered to try to encourage businesses to help to keep their storefronts clean and tidy. The owner of the predominant number of empty storefronts downtown has generally agreed to permit community living to clean the windows and to have artwork displayed, and people will see that now at the old Gray's or Krusty's Bakery, and it looks absolutely great. The Market Square proposal is alive and well, and we're looking forward to getting that to the next stage. The Nelson Square is about to get a facelift thanks to the Chamber of Commerce, the Rotary Club, and the Lions Club for participating financially in that. The Rotary and Kinsman Clubs have contributed funds to community living to have them continue with the sidewalk cleanups, and these will happen now every week, and we'll go right down both sides of Main Street now. 5,000 masks have been donated to the task force, and those will be distributed to businesses, and they'll be available through the chamber for any business that is in need of masks to give out to their staff or to customers coming into their shops. And that's it, Your Worship.
Greenfield? Councillor Greenfield? Sorry.
Thank you, Your Worship. Briefly, from the library board, we did have a meeting last Wednesday. Always busy at the library. We're looking forward to getting the original library once again open. It will have some limitations, but we are hoping to get some business as usual back there. Even more optimistically, before mid-September, getting into our new home. Very, very exciting times at the library. And just in the past, some folks in our municipality have mentioned that the library seems to be a huge cost of money. I just want to mention that our June pay sheets from the library were $13,000. That's not a bad sum for a very, very busy department. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's move on to memos. We have a planning meeting coming up very shortly here, so we'll move on, and I'll ask you if there are any of the memos that are presented here that you'd like to address. Councillor Greenfield.
Thank you, Your Worship. Surprisingly, I would like to mention the building report at the end of June, getting close to $10 million in permits. Some people would say that's really nothing to boast about, but when you look at the fact that a good 10 weeks have been torn out of the building construction world this year, I think it's very commendable. It's coming along. I just take council back, and this would be before the time of Councillor Kentner and Councillor Vickers, but I think back about 2013, 2012, we were looking at 12 months permits in the $13 to $14 million range. So to have almost 10 in a broken year by the end of June, I think is very commendable, and we're going to have some much better numbers by the end of December. Thank you.
Thank you, Harley. Any of the other memos that anyone would like to address? Okay, then seeing none, I'll now ask for a motion to move out of committee of the whole. Councillor Bartley, Councillor Kentner. All in favor? Thank you. And that is carried. Do we have any motions coming, notices of motions from council? Tony, Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. You and I had a brief conversation, Madam Mayor, about this, and my notice of motion will be for staff when they are compiling our councillor packages. This last package was 944 pages long. It was, in my personal opinion, far too long. In your closing remarks a week ago, Madam Mayor, you said that our staff have put together very wonderful and in-depth reports. And Madam Mayor, your point to myself was most well taken, because I'm now going to say the logical question for staff will be, well, then what does council want us to leave out? And I take that to be a perfect remark, and it would be a logical question on the part of staff. And I am going to suggest that what they could leave out would be any background meetings that we've had. They could include a link that if we wish to hit that link, we can look that up for ourselves. And so I'm suggesting that having a council package of 944 pages is far too long, and it leads to having meetings which are far too long. And on that note, Madam Mayor, I was fully supportive of yourself when you called an end to the meeting on the 13th. However, to call for a motion to adjourn from my background requires a seconder. But I have no problem when a meeting gets being very long to do exactly what this council did this evening. So I would just look for staff to come back with their opinions on the content and the length of packages that we receive. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bell. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. And I have two notices of motion this afternoon, if I may. The first one is in relation to item D in our communications. This is the request from People Care for exemption from DC's demolition and building permits and security deposits. And I'd like to request from staff a report that would aid council in this decision in terms of the setting of any precedent in relation to this, and also as well in relation to any pertinent information contained in Bill 197 from the province, which addresses recovery tools as they relate to development charges and community benefit charges. And the second one is a request for a report to address ways of expediting the process necessary to get to the stage of construction for bridges 21 and 22. I've learned this week that it would be probable that this construction would not begin until 2023. And I'd really like to have a report in hopes of finding ways of expediting this process and getting these bridges completed as soon as possible.
Okay.
Through you, Madam Mayor, if I could just comment on both of those. The CAO has previously at the People Care public meeting and since commented that he will deal with the request for exemptions from fees when we have the zoning bylaw request. So I don't think there needs to be a notice of motion about that. And there certainly shouldn't be a notice of motion about bridges 21 and 22 because council will be discussing the existing report about those at the next meeting and can amend that motion in any way they see fit.
Okay, thank you for that. Moving on then to the adoption of the minutes, council meeting of June 22nd. Mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Beth, Councillor Greenfield. Any comments or questions on those minutes? Seeing none, all in favor? Yeah, that is carried. And anything out of the communications file for discussion? Okay. Seeing none, we will accept those as received. And that then gives us 10 minutes break before we move into the planning meeting at 5 o'clock. And we will then adjourn after that. So we'll take a 10-minute break.
Are you there, Harley?
I am there. I am here.
I was really interested in how you were going to turn that building report, that pig's ear into a silk purse.
Did I succeed?
You did. You did.
Wonders don't ever cease, Steve.
Rock and roll here. Live. Okay. Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome. We are here together today to learn about proposals to amend the land use planning rules applying to certain lands in the municipality of Meaford. It's very important for me to note that the Planning Act requires that a person who may later wish to file an appeal to council's decision on these applications must either provide verbal comments today at this public meeting or provide written comments to the approval authority, that's Meaford Council or the County of Grey, before amendments are passed. The intention of this requirement is that only those people who have taken the time and the care to learn about the proposal and to engage in the to engage in the planning process may have an opportunity to appeal a decision to the local planning appeal tribunal. While council is legally required to make decisions that conform to the county and local official plans, Our guiding policies encourage us to reach out to you, the members of the community, to hear your thoughts about the proposed changes. Your constructive comments will help us to learn your thoughts about the proposed, more about your neighborhood, which in turn will help staff and council to select the right tools to manage change effectively and in a manner that honors our community values and priorities. Those who have pre-registered for today's meetings will have an opportunity to speak. You do not have to be solely in support or in opposition. It's okay to share your thoughts about those elements that you do and don't like about the proposal and to ask questions as well. While the applicant will have an opportunity to respond to questions and comments at the end of the meeting, in some cases, we may need to have staff carry out research on the matters raised and to provide answers or additional information to you following the meeting. So now call today's first public meeting to order. This is a joint public meeting of council and the County of Grey to consider a proposed county official plan and zoning amendment for 423020 Harbor Drive in the geographic township of Sydenham. This meeting is a mandatory part of the planning process, which has been set out under section 17 and 34 of the Planning Act. Based on the rules in the Act, there must be at least 20 days notice given to residents within 120 meters of the property. Mailed notice was issued June 23rd, 2020, giving 27 days notice, and a sign has also been placed on the property. So first I will ask Hiba Hussain, representing the County of Grey, for her comments on the file and to provide us with any public and agency comments received by the county in relation to the official plan amendment to date. Ms. Hussain. You're not connected?
Hello?
There you are.
Hi, good evening. How's everyone doing today?
We're doing fine, thanks, and we're glad you're here.
I'm glad to be here. So my name is Hiba Hussain, and I'm the planner for Grey County. I apologize in advance. I'm going to be reading a bit of a long script. It's just the regulations that we are required to read. So bear with me while I go through this. So the proposed county official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment affected those lands described as broken front concession, Part Lot 5 and Lot 6, known locally as 42302 Harbor Drive in the geographic township of Sydenham, now in the municipality of Meaford. This development requires 3 applications: a County of Grey official plan amendment, as well as a consent and zoning bylaw amendment to the municipality of Meaford. In order for the development to move forward, approvals are needed on all three of the applications. The county makes the decision on the county official plan amendment application, and the municipality makes the decision on the zoning bylaw amendment and the consent applications. For the purposes of this meeting, the official plan and zoning bylaw amendments will be discussed, and the consent BO1-20 is not going to be discussed at this time. The proposed county official plan amendment would consider exceptions to the transportation policies in Move Grey, agricultural and rural sections to permit lot creation where the remnant lot has access via an unopened municipal road allowance. Typically, such a lot creation is not permitted without access onto a year-round open and maintained municipal road or through a plan of condominium. The Meaford zoning bylaw amendment would amend section 9 to bylaw 60/2009, which will revise the environmental protection EP zoning on the subject lands and will identify a specific building envelope through the rural exception zone RU 279. A consent application has also been submitted to the municipality of Meaford to sever the lands into 2 parcels. These lots were originally separate parcels of land and inadvertently merged into a single piece of land. The severed parcel would gain access off Queens Bush Drive, while the retained parcel will gain access via the unopened municipal road allowance. The lands are designated rural and hazard lands in the county official plan and as rural and environmental protection in the municipality of Meaford official plan. As required by Section 17 and 34 of the Planning Act, as amended, council shall ensure that at least one public meeting is held, notice of which shall be given in a manner and to the persons and public bodies containing the prescribed information. In accordance with the Planning Act and the implementing regulations, the County of Grey gave notice of this public meeting by individual prepaid first-class mail to persons within 120 meters based on the most recent assessment information provided by MPAC, the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation, and to the extensive list of agencies set out in the regulations. A sign was also posted on the property. The public meeting notice is located on the county website at www.grey.ca. It is also imperative to note that if a person or public body would otherwise have an ability to appeal the decision of County of Grey or the municipality of Meaford in reference to the official plan and zoning bylaw amendment to the local planning appeals tribunal, but the person or public body does not make oral submissions at a public meeting or make written submissions to Grey County or the municipality of Meaford before the plan amendments are decided upon, the person or public body is not entitled to appeal the decisions and may not be added as a party to the hearing of the appeal before the local planning tribunal. Unless in the opinion of the tribunal, there are reasonable grounds to do so. If you wish to be notified of the decision of the proposed official plan and the zoning bylaw amendments, you must make a written request to the County of Grey. We are located at 595 9th Avenue East, Owen Sound, Ontario, and 4K3E3, or the municipality of Meaford, located at 21 Trowbridge Street West, Meaford, Ontario, and 4L1A1. Alternatively, you can also send an email to Liz Buckton, who's the municipal planner, or myself, the county planner. Both Liz and my email addresses can be found on the public meeting notice, and so can the addresses to both offices, the municipal and the county offices. If there are any comments, questions, or concerns for those in attendance this evening, please address the chair and give your name and lot concession or civic address for the record. Below are the comments that were received from the following agency. Enbridge, comments received June 8th, 2020. Enbridge Gas does not object to the proposed application. However, they reserve the right to amend the development conditions. Historic Saugeen Métis provided comments on June 22nd, 2020, and they stated that they have reviewed the relevant documents and have no objection or opposition to the proposed development, land redesignation, zoning, land severance, official plan, and or zoning bylaw amendments. Last agency comment we received was from the Grey Sauble Conservation Authority, dated July 15, 2020. And it is in the opinion of the GSCA that consistency with section 3.1 of the PPS has been demonstrated. 2, the Ontario Regulation 151-06 does apply to the subject site. A permit from GSCA may be required prior to any development or site alteration taking place within the severed parcel. 3, consistency with section 2.1 of the PPS has been demonstrated. And 4, the subject site is not located within an area that is subject to the policies contained in the Saugeen, Grey Sauble, Northern Bruce Peninsula Source Protection Plan. They write further, in order to achieve consistency with section 3.1 of the PPS, our office recommends that approval of the subject application is conditional on the completion of a zoning bylaw amendment to appropriately zone the identified hazard lands as environmental protection, EP, in the municipality zoning bylaw. In addition, development on the subject property should be restricted to the development envelopes outlined on the attached maps, and that any development requested must be accompanied by an engineering, lot, grading, and drainage plan. If an additional planning application is pursued in order to facilitate further development on the proposed parcel, or if development is proposed outside of the identified development envelopes, our office recommends that an environmental impact study, EIS, is completed. We have received no public comments so far. Back to you, Chair.
Municipal planner to provide us with any further comments on the file and any additional agency comments that have been received in relation to these files. to date. And Liz, over to you.
Hi there. Can you hear me? I just can't see myself. Oh, there I am. Okay. Perfect. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I don't have any further agency comments to share. HIPAA has done a great job summarizing those. What I will just comment is that this may sound familiar to council. We did have a request for acquisition of the unopened road allowance that will be servicing the retained parcel here. And I had provided a prior report to council which had identified that from a local official plan perspective, staff were satisfied that we met kind of the intention of the policy in terms of providing access to that retained parcel, which does not have additional development potential without going through a process. It was identified that there are some, I guess, conflicting or shared use demands on that retained road allowance. And so staff had recommended at that point in time that we keep that in municipal ownership and that access to the retained parcel be facilitated based on kind of the common law permissions that apply to allow folks to access their property from those lands as they have done for many years. So I just wanted to kind of make that connection for council that this does relate to the prior reporting that has been done on the file. And we will definitely within our staff report provide a link, I think has been suggested, to that background information so that council can do that further investigation of what we've previously reported on. So I will pass that back to the mayor. Thank you.
Now I'll call upon the agent, Christine Loft, to review the proposal in more detail and to provide any comments that they wish to share about the application.
Good evening.
Good evening. Welcome.
How are you? Can I have video on, or I'm not seeing an option for video on my end.
It's been our policy, Christine, that we only have audio deputations.
Okay.
So you can just carry on as you are.
Okay, thank you. And my PowerPoint?
Is on its way.
Okay. So I'll begin. So the as HIPAA's indicated, there is an OPA and a zoning bylaw before you tonight for the public meeting, and there is an associated consent application. The OPA dealt with a couple of different policies in the county OP and the transportation policy section, as well as the agricultural and rural policies. And basically that the OPA will deal with the lot creation, with the frontage, and with the access. The purpose of the zoning bylaw amendment was to identify the developable lands on the property, as well as to update or amend the environmental protection zone as reported by the Conservation Authority. So ultimately, the effect of these two applications is to implement an associated consent application. Next, slide 3, please. So the site is located along the Georgian Bay shoreline with Harbor View or Harbor Drive to the east and Queens Bush Drive to the west. There's approximately 820 meters of frontage on Georgian Bay. The lot area is 37.6 hectares, and lot 5 is provided access by an unopened road allowance and has access to Harbor Drive, which is the yellow markup on the PowerPoint. And the property is heavily treated and includes 9 existing cottages that are located along the shoreline. Lot 6, which is in blue, it has frontage and access onto Queens Bush Drive, and this area is vacant. And as Liz has pointed out, there was, council has seen this before through the access onto Queens Bush Drive. Next slide. So the amendments would implement the severance of lots 5 and lot 6. These did inadvertently merge. So the lot 6 parcel is the severed parcel. It's a vacant parcel of land with 19.8 hectares of land and 26 meters of frontage coming out onto Queens Bush Road. And the retained lot is known as lot 5 and contains the 9 existing cottages and will maintain an area of 17.8 hectares. These were, as you see them, they were existing lots of record prior to the inadvertent merger. Next slide. The County of Grey official plan designates the lands rural and hazard. Next slide. And the official plan amendment then needed to identify a number of different sections. I've identified them on the slide, but ultimately at the bottom of the slide are the 3 points that were required as part of the proposed amendment. So a new lot may be permitted where the severed lot is accessed via Queens Bush Drive and the retained lot gains access via an unopened municipal road allowance. No new development shall be permitted on the retained lot until such time as year-round access has been provided to the satisfaction of the municipality, and that a zoning bylaw amendment is required, which acknowledges changes to the hazard land boundaries and the building envelope. And as I've said, those were established in conjunction with the Grace Sabo Conservation Authority. Next slide. And the zoning bylaw, the actual consent application would not have required an implementing zoning bylaw based on the lot area and the rural zone. However, in order to satisfy the Conservation Authority, it was a zoning bylaw amendment was required. And so it was twofold. It updates the Schedule A in terms of updated mapping of that environmental protection zone. And it also establishes an exception, exception 279, which recognizes building envelopes are basically developable lands. And the next slide is, I think, my second last slide, and just identifies the mapping. So the EP mapping and the rural 279 mapping is basically the mapping that the Conservation Authority provided as an update to what is currently in your comprehensive zoning bylaw. So that is the Schedule A that would be proposed as part of this amendment process. And in conclusion, then the development is consistent with PPS. It conforms to the county plan, conforms to the municipality of Meaford official plan, and complies with the zoning bylaw. And those are my comments. Thank you.
Thanks. Thanks so much for your comments, Ms. Loft. So we have no members of the public registered at this time to speak on this application. And so I would ask council or our local planner, Liz, if you have any further comments or questions on this application. Councillor Bartley, Councillor Kentner. Councillor Bartley first.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a question, Liz. For what reason would Enbridge Gas have anything to say in this thing? Why are they getting involved?
Great question. So with planning applications, and the municipality has our own list, the county has their own list as well. We circulate folks based on the types of applications they have self-identified that they want to hear about, as well as based on the provisions within the Planning Act. So I expect that they've been included on the circulation as a result of being on one of those lists, and would have provided comments. We normally see just very generic comments from them with respect to these proposals, because they certainly do at the time of development, if there is an extension of gas services into the property, that they would have, I guess, feedback into that process for that extension directly. But I don't think there's anything specific that pertains to gas in particular for this application.
Councillor Kentner.
My question was simply, am I unmuted yet?
Yes.
Okay, my question was simply how these properties managed to merge inadvertently. There are many ways properties can merge, but inadvertently?
In planning, inadvertent merges happen fairly frequently, unfortunately, and it has to do with the way the Planning Act is worded. When we're talking about permissions to deal with lands in abutting ownership separately, the Planning Act sets out certain exemptions, I guess, for the need to have some type of planning approval to split those lands and deal with them individually. So in a lot of cases, when we have an inadvertent merge, It simply occurs by the fact that a landowner owned one piece and then acquires the adjacent piece in the same ownership. And unless those lots have either been created by consent or represent a whole lot on a plan of subdivision, they actually then merge on title and a new planning approval is required to split them back apart. So it's typically where they've taken them into common ownership. Sometimes it's just an oversight. Sometimes, you know, the lawyer thought they had some kind of permission to prevent them from merging, but it does happen, unfortunately, more commonly than you'd think.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Greenfield.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Liz and Christine. Owners of properties within 120 meters were notified. Can you give me some idea of just how many property owners that would be? Like, would that be the little cottages down at Johnson's Harbor? Would they be included? Would the folks who have very, very nice cottages on Queen's Bush Shore, would they be notified, or would there be very many notifications in this instance?
So I think, so it's 120 meters from every property boundary. So property owners in both cases received notices, so in both directions, as well as to the direct south of the property. I want to say it's in the range of about 10 to 12 properties, just thinking back to when I put those envelopes in the mail. It's not a huge subset, but the intention is that it's really those folks who could be directly affected. I did receive some questions from adjacent property owners, but nothing that anybody wanted to put in as a formal comment per se, just clarifying that the development would be maintained outside of the environmental protection areas, which is part of the intent of the zoning. And then I understand that the initial mailing that went out had missed some of the property owners in the Queen's Bush subdivision. And so that was then reissued by the county to those individuals as well. So I don't think I have anything further that I can add to that based on what I have access to right now, but I can certainly confirm for you the exact number if you're interested.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I have a question for Liz, and it has to do with the terminology, which I see many, many times when we take a look at the Grey County's official plan, and we take a look where they describe lands as hazardous. Now, hazardous being a word that is used conjures up in my mind biological or chemical or an industrial major problem. And really, when we look at how it's designated on the maps, really, they look like they're nothing more than wetlands a lot of the time. And it just means that ultimately you really can't build there. And so I'm just looking for why would, on the official plan from Grey County, would it list something designated as hazardous? Can you have that explanation, please?
Certainly, thank you, Councillor. So the county, their hazard designation is essentially the same as our environmental protection designation. Those are generally used interchangeably. I think both are accurate, and maybe it's hazard and environmental protection would be the most accurate description, because certainly, I guess from the perspective of a development, wet basements are a hazard. Water courses that could prevent access to a building envelope are a hazard. Slopes that are unstable would be a hazard. But then there's also those being environmental features, the potential natural heritage impacts associated with development relating to habitat and destruction of habitat. So I think both of those, they are applied interchangeably, but I think it really references kind of the combined impact of those natural features from the perspective of development that we need to make sure we're regulating or mitigating.
To this application. And seeing none, I will ask Agent Christine Loft if you have any closing comments.
No, thank you. No, thank you.
No, okay, thank you. So that closing of the meeting brings us to the closing of the meeting, and I appreciate everyone attending and sharing your thoughts on these applications. This matter will now be referred back to the Development Services staff to follow up on any additional information required from the applicant based on matters raised today. Once staff are satisfied that they have all the necessary information needed to provide a recommendation on the zoning amendment application, a detailed planning report will be brought back to council to assist us in our decision making. So if any in the audience would like to receive mailed notice of a future decision on the zoning amendment, please provide your contact information to the clerk by email at msmith@meaford.ca or by submitting a written request to the municipal administration offices. And if you'd like to receive notice of a future decision on county official plan amendments, please make a written request to the County of Grey at 595 9th Avenue East, Owen Sound, Ontario, N4K3E3. That brings us to a close of the first planning meeting, and I will now call today's second meeting to order. This is again a public meeting of council to consider a proposed zoning amendment for 158458 7th line in the geographic township of St. Vincent. This meeting is a mandatory part of the planning process, which has been set out by the Planning Act. Based on the rules in the Act, there must be at least 20 days notice given to residents within 120 meters of the property. And I note that notice was issued June 27th, 2020, giving 23 days notice. So first I'll ask Liz to share a brief description of the application and to provide us with any public and agency comments that have been received to date.
Thank you very much. Just get my speaking notes up here. Okay, so this application requests a zoning amendment to establish permissions on site for a new 48-person bunkhouse containing sleeping, washroom, shower, cooking, and laundry facilities to provide accommodation for seasonal farm workers for a large orchard operation in the area, as well as to provide accommodation for an additional 18 workers within existing structures that are on site. We have received agency comments from 2 agencies, and I can speak to those now. To my understanding, we have not received any public comments to date. So the Historic Saugeen Métis has noted no objection or opposition to the request. And the Grey Sauble Conservation Authority has actually made the recommendation that a decision on the application be deferred until such time that consistency with section 3.1.2C of the PPS regarding safe ingress and egress has been demonstrated. A review of the existing entrance and proximate watercourse and valley features by a qualified engineer is recommended in this regard. And we do see that comment come up from time to time where there is a watercourse crossing associated with access for a property. In this case, the Conservation Authority feels that based on the number of people to be accommodated on site, we should be going through and doing that detailed review work for that entrance so that we know that under a flooding scenario, for example, people can still get in and out of the property. So I think that's all I have to share at this point in time. I know the applicant and their agent have some additional information to share with us. So I will pass that back to you, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. And now I'll call upon the agent, Ron Davidson, to review the proposal in more detail and to provide any commentary they wish us to hear about this application.
Yes, good afternoon. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you, Ron. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And I apologize in advance. My neighbor's having a tree removed as we speak here. And hopefully you can't hear that. I certainly can with the chainsaw going. So anyways, good afternoon. I just want to say a few things. And first of all, Ian is on the line. He represents the ownership of the property. And he doesn't intend to speak unless council has questions that I can't answer. As Liz indicated, this property, it's 41.7 hectares of land, and 10 of them have an apple orchard on now. Now the owner is affiliated with another apple producing company that owns 190 hectares of land, which were planted in apple trees a few years ago. So the orchard owners hire seasonal migrant workers and provide them with accommodation. And of course, that's not new in Meaford. Some of the workers can be accommodated on the site right now in a 10-bed bunkhouse that's on the property. And then while others associated with this operation have to live elsewhere from a bunkhouse that is leased from another party. When this newly planted orchard that I was speaking of, that's about 190 hectares in size, when it starts producing apples in the next couple years, the owners will certainly experience a serious shortage of housing for their workers. So therefore, they want to address this problem now by erecting a 48-person bunkhouse on the subject property as soon as possible. The bunkhouse would have facilities for sleeping, washroom facilities, including showers, cooking, laundry, and a common area. And as Liz indicated, the owners also wish to convert the existing house into an 8-bed bunkhouse as well. Just quickly here, I've prepared a planning report which evaluated the application within the context of the local official plan, the county official plan, and the provincial policy statement. And I'm sure when Liz provides her report to you in the future, she'll be doing the same. I should indicate, this is very important, that there were 2 other reports prepared by the engineer, which is GSS Engineering, those being a servicing options report and a hydrogeological study. Of course, the servicing options report identified a private well as the only feasible means of supplying a potable water supply to the bunkhouse. There's no way you're going to extend municipal water or provide for some type of a communal system out there. And the hydrogeological study advised that in order to provide a sufficient water supply during peak flows, there has to be a concrete tank, I guess, or a cistern of at least 11,400 liters in size. Now, the report concluded, these reports that the engineer prepared concluded that installing a private septic system was the only feasible means for sewage for this property. Of course, again, you're not going to extend sanitary sewers. And the report went on to state that there is a good area, a proper area on the site for a class 4 treatment system with an in-ground area filter bed. And of course, the septic system will be rather large to accommodate all these employees. There was a couple of comments raised, as Liz indicated. The county raised an issue, or more of a question, wondering if we have addressed COVID-19. And of course, I'm sure that's probably on all council's mind. And before the county actually wrote that letter, the owners were proactive in addressing that. And I'm reading from an email that was sent to Liz from the ownership that says, we've been in consultation with Christine at the Grey Bruce Public Health in the planning phases, and then again last month. So with this pandemic situation, to make sure that the building design was adequate. Based on this feedback, it seems there isn't anything that needs to be changed at present. So that should hopefully address that concern. With regard to the issue raised by the Conservation Authority about access across the property, yeah, that I saw that that's come across my desk about 5:30 Friday night. Tried to get hold of the engineer today, but he was not working. But that is something that will be addressed, presumably before Liz wants to bring her report back to council. Doesn't sound like it's a big issue. Nevertheless, it is something that we will look into. That's it for my presentation. I'm sorry I was so long-winded.
Thank you. We have nobody registered to speak on this application at this time, so I will ask council members if they have a question for the agent. Councillor Kentner.
Thank you, through your worship. I guess, Ron, could I just ask you, it sounded like, you know, 1 washroom facility, 1 kitchen and so forth for 48 people. Can you give us some kind of an idea, like how many square feet per person, or the size of the washroom facilities or something of that nature?
Madam Mayor, if I may, perhaps I can just jump in there. Ron, I'm not sure if you heard that that particular question was directed at you. We do have preliminary plans and drawings for the buildings, and they have been discussed within the planning report. So perhaps Ron can just take a look and pull that together for you. I will note that as he was speaking about county comments, I realized as I scroll down my page that I had neglected to mention those comments. They had indicated generally that they would like to see positive comments be received through the Grey Bruce Health Unit in terms of kind of the layout with respect to the accommodation on site, just to make sure that it's meeting all requirements of the health unit. Staff have also reached out to the health unit through our local health promoter contact, just to understand if there are any comments they can provide us around the additional legislation and regulations that they enforce relating to small water systems and farm worker accommodation, just to provide us with an understanding of what they cover, and which is outside of our process perhaps, but related, certainly intersecting through the land use on site. So we will wait to hear back from the health unit, but I will just ask Ron, did you want to speak to the physical features of the building?
Sure. I have a feeling when I was speaking there that I was still muted, and I apologize for that. That's my first time I've done that, probably in 25 meetings. I'm looking at a site plan. So first of all, there have been detailed drawings prepared. I'm looking at a site plan that the engineer had prepared. It's just shows on the outside that the building's going to be 9.6 meters. So you're looking at you're pushing, what's that, about 33 feet by 26.2 meters long. So it is a good sized building. I can't off the top of my head tell you exactly how many square feet that would be per person. But I can certainly make sure that that type of information, if I don't already have it in here, is fed to Liz for when she does her planning report to council, if that's acceptable.
That's good, thank you. Councillor Greenfield.
Okay, here we go. Yes, through you to Mr. Davison. Ron, as a member of the Grace Auba Conservation Authority, I had to pick up on Jacob Closey's comment, his request for a deferral. We're talking about basically a runoff creek, but I understand it drains something like 235 hectares to the west of these proposed buildings, which is, I think, about 500 acres. And in today's world of climate change, and it's not impossible anymore to have as much as 4.5 inches of rain within 24 hours, quite a deluge. I guess there's some concern about these buildings being isolated if indeed the laneway or the culvert or whatever access gets washed out. Now, I believe you said that this would be addressed. Do you expect this will be addressed before it comes back to council? You said GSS have done engineer studies on the properties. This is one they haven't done, but again, as a member of the authority, I'll have to bring their concerns forward on this. Thank you. Maybe. Liz?
Okay. Yes. Okay. So yeah, on that note, yeah, absolutely, Councillor Greenfield. Like I said, we will have GSS Engineering look into this. The Conservation Authority made it clear in their letter that the engineer should approach the Conservation Authority right away and come up with what they call a terms of reference, just so the engineer knows exactly what he's doing before he starts doing any work. And that makes sense. So they'll know the scope of the work. As a planner, I don't really expect Liz to bring this back to council. Maybe my client doesn't want to hear that. Yeah, Conservation Authority's right. This has to be taken a look at, and hopefully we can get the engineer to look at it quickly. And it's not much time at all before Liz has enough information to bring back for council's consideration.
Hello.
I need a knife.
Anything further, Councillor Greenfield? No?
No, that's fine. Thanks, Ron. Thanks, Your Worship.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions from council? All right, and then I'll take it back to you, Ron, for any final comments.
I have nothing further to add. Thank you very much, Your Worship.
Thank you. And thanks for attending this meeting and for sharing your thoughts on the application. Again, this matter will be referred back to Development Services staff to follow up on any additional information that is required from the applicant based on the matters that have been discussed today. So again, to the public, if you would like to receive mailed notice of a future decision on this file, please provide your contact information to the clerk by email at msmith@meaford.ca. And with that ends the second meeting, and I will call today's third meeting to order. This is a public meeting of council to consider a proposed zoning amendment for 52 Blake Street in the geographic town of Meaford. This meeting is a mandatory part of the planning process, which has been set out by Planning Act. Based on the rules in the Act, there must be at least 20 days notice given to residents within 120 meters of the property. And note that the notice was issued June 27th, giving 23 days of notice. So first I will turn it over to you, Liz, to share a brief description of the application and to provide us with any public and agency comments that have been received to date. Over to you.
Great. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. So this application, it's an implementing zoning amendment relating to a severance application that was conditionally approved by the Committee of Adjustment last year. As a condition of consent, the applicant is required to obtain a zoning amendment to restrict construction on retained lands and to establish a site-specific building envelope in a location that's not anticipated to bias against future development of the lands as has been intended by the official plan. In order to satisfy this condition, the applicant has requested the amendment, and that amendment will, number one, establish a site-specific exception for the severed parcel to acknowledge the existing residential use of the parcel and grant relief from Section 4.8 of the zoning bylaw requiring new lots to provide frontage on a public road. Two, establish a site-specific exception for the retained parcel to allow for a new detached dwelling to be erected within a specific envelope on site. And three, to place a holding symbol on the retained or balance of the retained parcel to prohibit any buildings or structures to be erected on the remaining lands. So this parcel, it's off the end of Blake Street, and it's within the block between Center and Union Streets to the south of Blake. This whole area between Center and Union is identified as part of our urban living area designation within the official plan. And so it is earmarked for future infill development within the center of that block. And so when we speak to not biasing against future development, that's what we're speaking to, is that what the applicant does on this property could, if not placed appropriately, limit the potential for extension of a road or services back into that central portion of the block to facilitate future development. In this case, there was an existing house on the property, and that was the subject of the severance, is to take that existing house off. That existing house will retain a right-of-way from the end of Blake Street into the lands. The house is occupied by mom and dad, and it's my understanding that the landowner who will be retaining the retained parcel would like to build their own home on those lands as well. Given that kind of the infill development in this block is quite a ways out into the future, most likely based on our communications with other property owners nearby, we felt that this would be an appropriate compromise to allow them to move forward with some development of the lands while giving consideration to how not to bias that future development. So I did receive a couple of agency comments on this. Historic Saugeen Métis have noted no objection or opposition. The Grey Sauble Conservation Authority indicates that their office generally has no objection to the approval of the subject zoning amendment. They do recommend that development within the proposed building envelope be supported by an engineered lot grading and drainage plan to adequately address potential drainage concerns and ensure no negative impacts to neighboring properties. The property is fairly level and flat. So I think their concern is that by increasing the impervious surface on site, that could result in some drainage concerns. It is a standard requirement of the municipality for infill residential development to do a grading and drainage plan as part of their building permit process. So I'll note that while we're at it. Finally, I received comments from the County of Grey. They referenced their comments, which were provided back when the severance application was being addressed last year, which suggested that of a general planning nature, the proposed lot creation shall not unduly prejudice future development on adjacent lands. The extension of Lake Street and municipal services to adjacent lands should not be hindered by the proposed severance. And what they've indicated there is they don't have specific concerns in relation to the zoning amendment itself, provided that is addressed. So that certainly is the intention. And I know the planner and the applicant have worked to facilitate a layout on the property that will maintain space for a future extension of Lake Street if that is the form of development that takes place. And that option remains open. So I will turn that back to you, Madam Mayor, and thank you very much. I'm happy to assist with questions.
Thanks, Liz. And now I'll go back to you, Mr. Davidson, to review the proposal in more detail and to provide any comments that you may have to share.
Sure, thank you again. You can hear me okay?
Yes.
Good, thanks. I just don't like to speak and have that muted. So yeah, as Liz indicated, the severance was granted actually quite a while ago when we're coming close to our 1 year. Reason why it took so long to get the rezoning in front of you is because Liz and I discovered quite a big discrepancy in the mapping. The county mapping turns out was I don't want to say way off, but the shape and size of the property was not accurate. So we actually got a reference plan done. So that was extremely helpful. As Liz indicated, the only purpose of this rezoning really is to allow the owners to build a house, and we're pushing it in the southeast corner of this lot so that you can still develop the rest of this property if there's ever a subdivision idea that is planned for this property. There's really not much more to say than that. Thank you.
Well, thanks for that. We have no record of anyone in the public that has registered to speak on this application. So I will ask council if they have any points that they'd like to make or questions of either the applicant or Liz. And seeing none from council, I guess that's it, unless you have final comments, Mr. Davidson.
I do not. Thank you.
Thank you. Well then, thank everyone for attending this meeting and sharing your thoughts on the application. Again, this matter will be referred back to Development Services staff to follow up on any additional information required from the applicant based on what we've heard today. Again, to the public, if you would like to receive mailed notice of a future decision on this file, please provide your contact information to the clerk by email at msmith@meaford.ca. And that completes all of the planning matters that we were under discussion today and brings us to the end of our scheduled council meeting. And with that, I will call the meeting adjourned. Thanks, everyone.